Hey, you, guess what? I distracted you, and when you look back up, you've just been sent back in time to 16th century Germany, and you know exactly what that means. You're in the height of the European witch trials, so you have to find a way to communicate with the present, and tell them where you've been isekai'd to, and all you have is a witch hunter's manual, and some Magic the Gathering cards. What do? Well, you make a commander deck, of course. Which was a really stupid, convoluted way of saying, in this video I'm making a Magic commander deck using only a 500-year-old witch hunter's manual used during the European witch trials. For my non-Magic playing viewers, please don't click off! This is more focused on the book and its history than it is the card mechanics, and the Magic side of it is largely vibes based. You don't really need to know much about the game to understand the video. For my Magic players, yeah, that means this deck is going right into tier 1, baby. I just thought this video would make a fun way to talk about some witch trial history since it is Halloween. Yeah, it's November now. I missed the deadline. And hey, maybe you'll find your next commander deck along the way. The manual in question is a book called the Malleus Maleficarum, which is the coolest name for a book ever. It's also Latin for the Hammer of Witches, which is the second coolest name for a book ever. Ultimately, I picked this book because it was very accessible. It's probably the most well-known witch hunter's handbook today. It has multiple translations and plenty of modern critical and codicological books on it to use for reference. While this book was extremely popular for its day as it went through 14 editions, it wasn't even the most distributed book during the witch trials, nor was it the most influential, but it earned its place as the most memorable to a modern audience, possibly due to the number of surviving copies, seeing as it was the premier book for a lot of judges and clergy during the trials, or just due to how insane some of the book's contents are. A little background on our author, because he's a weird little guy. Heinrich Kramer, not that Kramer, was a Dominican priest, not that Dominican, born in Germany in 1430. Not much is known about his early life, but by 1474 he had been appointed inquisitor over several regions of Germany. But more importantly, he learned something about himself. He learned that there's two things in this beautiful world that he hated more than anything: sorcery and women. I hate women! So now I'm making a Magic deck about him, and a woman might watch this video. It comes full circle. The event that probably inspired him to write the Malleus and subsequently solidify his name in the annals of history was October 29th, 1485. Note that the witch trials were already underway in Central Europe at this time. Kramer and 13 other inquisitors had arrived in Innsbruck, Germany to interrogate some accused witches. One of the accused, named Helena Scheuberin, was being put on trial for several charges, including allegedly poisoning a woman to take that woman's husband from her, and poisoning and killing a knight she was having an affair with. Now, the court said the guy either died from poisoning or witchcraft, which, I mean, obviously it's witchcraft, come on. Also, my source for this video says that Helena Scheuberin, coincidentally, had been previously married to one of the visiting inquisitors, who my source calls a prosperous burgher. I'm not going to look up what that means, I'm just going to assume he was a Big Mac. So Scheuberin was trying to publicly call out the inquisitors for being evil themselves, trying to get others to avoid their sermons, things like that. And old Kramer, he didn't like this wench disrespecting him. So when the time rolled around for the investigation, Kramer, who was leading it, went full creep and just started asking all kinds of sexual questions. Okay, princess. Basically, I need to know, have you been saving yourself for me? What? You haven't? Ah, baka. Oh, sorry, princess. I didn't mean to swear around you, but you know this makes me very angry. The other inquisitors were like, hey, can you stop that? This is a murder investigation. Well, actually it was a witch investigation, but it probably should have been a murder investigation by the sound of it. I phrased that facetiously, but the other inquisitors literally stopped the investigation to ask Kramer to stop being a creep. And he didn't. He kept being a weirdo towards this woman until the literal witch hunting inquisitors got so uncomfortable, they had to adjourn the investigation for the day. That's right, our boy Kramer may have been history's very first incel. While we can't exactly say that Scheuberin won in this scenario, seeing how she was executed, she certainly was successful in embarrassing Kramer, not only in front of his fellow inquisitors, but the whole of the town of Innsbruck. So much so that he would go on to publish the Malleus Maleficarum the very next year, a witch hunting handbook that would effectively spearhead the worst years of the European witch trials, resulting in the death of tens of thousands, which would make for a nice dramatic crescendo to the story if it were true. The Innsbruck trial likely wasn't the reason that Kramer wrote the Malleus. While scholars used to believe that this was the case, the currently accepted theory is that he just didn't think that local inquisitors were doing a good enough job catching witches. But I still like to believe that he wrote it because he was just a raging incel freak. It's also worth noting that there was a second author listed on the Malleus, Jacob Springer, but his name didn't appear until a few years after the book's publishing, so it's not totally clear if he actually contributed to its writing or if his name was just added for authority. And either way, when I'm talking about the author, it's just much easier to say Kramer rather than Kramer and Springer. And yes, when I say Kramer, I want you to picture Michael Richards from Seinfeld. And yes, this is post-Laugh Factory incident. Okay, now on to the Magic deck. The commander I picked for this deck is Karlov of the Ghost Council, because he's a clergyman, he's an advisor, it represents the high church, and he's a ghost. We don't know that Heinrich Kramer wasn't a ghost. Think about that. His effect doesn't have any relation to witches, but we can imagine that his exile ability was him sentencing witches to death, because isn't that fun? Some other cards that I added that could describe Kramer are Faithbound Judge, which is what he thought he was, who transforms into Sitter's Judgment, then Zealous Inquisitor, and most literally, Traveling Minister. To make the rest of the deck, I kind of just want to go through the rest of the Malleus and make some relevant card choices along the way, because that should result in a cohesive playable deck. The preamble of the book is just some boring justification as to why Kramer has the authority to write the book, as well as the papal bull, which is just the order from the Pope giving him permission to write the book. In other words, the chaplain's blessing to write it. I tried to find another card for this section, but the only time the combination of letters Pope appears on a card is this octopus, and papal is this weird showed up elf thing from Final Fantasy. I think we're good leaving those out. Section 1 of the Malleus lays out the theological groundwork for if witches really exist, how they operate, and generally what you, as the law-abiding Catholic of the 16th century, are supposed to believe about them. All in the form of a Q&A with a nice little table of contents. I'm just going to highlight some interesting stuff here and save all of us the tedium of going through the philosophical and theological debate that makes up the bulk of this section. On the subject of if witches really exist, Kramer posits that since the devil is real, witches must be real, and since Satan can't physically affect the material world, he has to use something, i.e. witches, to do his bidding. And to Kramer, in order to be a true believer, you have to accept the witches are real. And this is a 2/2 human cleric with the ability, You Have Shroud. And to quote this section of the book, no operation of witchcraft has a permanent effect among us. In other words, we can't be the target of spells or abilities. That's perfect. It's all downhill from here. So why are witches just now appearing in the 16th century? Because it's the apocalypse. Duh. And Satan is delaying the return of Jesus by spreading all these evil witches everywhere. You could say that Satan is an apocalypse demon, bringing about Armageddon. Clock. Question 6 of this section is, concerning witches who copulate with devils, why is it that women are chiefly addicted to evil superstitions? This section, which is so sexist that it would shock even Andrew Tate, talks about how, to become a witch, a woman will form a demonic pact with the devil by giving him a demonic embrace in a dark ritual as a demonic bargain to satiate his demonic appetite. I'm on a roll. In other words, the witch-to-be will copulate with the devil in exchange for magical powers. He implies that the witches don't even do it for the powers, they're just boinking demons for the love of the game. Quote, all witchcraft comes from carnal lust, which is, in women, insatiable. Wherefore, for the sake of fulfilling their lusts, they consort even with devils. So when he puts it like that, it kind of just sounds like a win-win from the perspective of the witch. Kramer also inquires if people can see this going down as the witch is doing the evil deed, as if it's like a stand from JoJo and non-stand users can't see it. Just to drive his point home on how dastardly these dang old witches are, Kramer tells us that the sin of sorcery is the ultimate sin, even more severe than Lucifer rebelling against God. He says the witches are literally worse than Satan. His reasoning is that they serve Satan and are influenced by him, and that makes them worse somehow. Like, if you are Hitler's assistant, you're worse than Hitler? I don't know. Guys, I'm starting to think this guy is kinda crazy. Anyway, to represent the sins of the past, I have Sins of the Past. Did you know that witches can make your penis disappear? Me neither. Kramer says not to believe those rumors that witches can cast an illusion to make you think that your ding-a-ling disappeared, because they can actually make it disappear. Gulp. For that I use sudden disappearance. They can also transform you into an animal, which I don't know if that's better or worse. And of course, they sacrifice human babies. Yawn. Boring. Alex Jones accuses someone of that like every other day. I don't have a specific card for this, but there's like a loose sacrifice thing going on mechanically with the deck, but I'll get into that later. The rest of part 1 just talks about why they supposedly needed witch trials and more theological stuff to slog through. But we don't have all day, so on to part 2. Part 2 talks about specific spells that witches were supposedly using against the rest of the population, as well as countermeasures for if a witch gets you with one of them, again in the form of a Q&A. According to Kramer, The best way to prevent the influence of witches and sorcery is by evoking your guardian angel, and they'll fight the good fight against evil for you. Now, how do you summon your guardian angel? Well, some medieval magic practitioners had some rituals to do that, but something tells me that Kramer wouldn't really like that approach. But I know another way though, by paying 4 white, or 2 and 3 white. He also specifies that you need a good guardian angel though, so I didn't include this one because it kinda sucks. Now, one bit of 16th century German history that everyone knows is that back then they didn't let women drive cars. So how are the witches supposed to get hither and yon? By flying, of course. It was a common belief at that time, not just in the Malleus, that witches could literally fly to meet with their covens for a practice called a sabbat or a Sabbath. Kramer parrots this idea but mentions that it could be a physical flight to a location or some kind of psychological out-of-body experience. Either way, it didn't happen. But what did happen is Candlegrove Witch, which gains flying for a turn if we control 3 or more creatures with different powers. And then we also have Leap of Faith, get it, Faith, which can also give one of our witches flying to get to her Sabbath on time, you know, so that they can gather for magic. The Gathering. The Malleus also mentions, albeit very briefly, that there are some male witches, probably just as a deflection in case anyone points out to Kramer how insanely sexist he is. Haha, just kidding, he doesn't hide it. So I also put a single male witch in the deck for some representation, Divining Witch. Plus, divination was a popular form of actual magic being practiced by Christians of Central Europe at that time, so it fits perfectly. The prescribed counteraction for all of these pesky spells that witches can cast is mostly just exorcisms, so here's exercise. However, if you had that penis disappearing spell cast on you, you might want to use urgent exorcism. This isn't relevant at all, but I found this passage in this section saying that the devil can make babies extra heavy. For such children are always miserable and crying, and although 4 or 5 mothers could hardly support enough milk for them, they never grow fat, yet are heavy beyond the ordinary. This should neither be affirmed nor denied to women, on account of the great fear it may cause them, but they should be instructed to ask the opinion of learned men, for God permits this on the account of the sins of the parents. Men curse their pregnant wives, saying, "May you be carrying a devil," or some such thing. I know German people can be kind of autistic, but who says, "May you be carrying a devil" to a pregnant woman, even in the 1500s? Actually, I'm gonna start saying that to pregnant women I pass in the grocery store. Finally, on to part 3, which is the trial part of the whole witch trial thing. All of the legal preparation and convicting of an alleged witch, and getting them to confess the crimes that they didn't commit. And wouldn't you believe it, the Malleus recommends torture. What? No, not Kramer, not our precious Kramer. Are they a witch? Doesn't matter, really, because most people will admit to being one if they're tortured. Kramer is probably of the mindset of, witch or not, they're women, so they're evil either way. Don't quote that. Once they reach a confession, you know, one way or another, the Inquisitor will hand over the witch to the secular authorities. So the actual local governments would do the executions and not the Inquisitors. So for that, I have corrupt court official. And the book calls this relaxing the witch over to the authorities. Relaxing? That doesn't sound very relaxing to me. So once the witch was handed over to the secular authorities, usually what would happen is the witch would be burned, and usually after they had been strangulated to death. I thought this was a bit too dark to put a card in. Just kidding, burn at the stake. No guys, actually I can't put this in because it's red, so be realistic. Okay, this video has devolved well past the point of talking about this book, so let's just look at the rest of the cards in the deck. For the creatures, I basically included every witch that fit the color, identity, and visual theme. So we got Accursed Witch, Bitterheart Witch, Kindly Stranger / Demon Possessed Witch, which is the most historically accurate since they believed witches were demon possessed. Plague Witch, Kramer speaks on witches spreading disease. Is also believed by some that witches spread the Black Plague. Ragged Recluse / Odious Witch, which is a kind of sad reference to how a lot of accused witches were widowed or unmarried reclusive women. Vain Witch Coven, and Witch of the Moors. And of course the rest of the creatures, we have our bunch of priests and inquisitors, Abyssinian missionaries / Lunarch inquisitors, Banisher Priest, Containment Priest, Containing the Evil, am I right? Voice of the Blessed, Militant Inquisitor, they all have some real life Inquisition ties. And of course, Witch Hunter, who's legit kind of scary. Also, dude's got some man boobs on him. I also threw in Sanguinary Priest, which is a Warhammer 40k card. I don't really know anything about 40k, but I know that the Empire is very gothic and has a lot of Roman Empire vibes. And you know that this is the kind of guy that Kramer imagined himself as. And we can't forget about the pets. The concept of a witch's familiar actually doesn't appear anywhere in the Malleus, Malleus, as that was more of an Anglo-Saxon belief. But no witch deck is complete without our Cauldron Familiar and Witches Familiar.
Huge fat frog with text underneath that says, huge massive big off frog.
We also got Descend Upon the Sinful, Inquisitor's Snare, Destroy Evil, as well as our artifacts, Hedge Witch's Mask, Inquisitorial Rosette, Inquisitor's Flail, Witchbane Orb. I also threw in a Season of the Witch, of course, and also Grave Pact. Spooky, and it helps make up for how bad the rest of the deck is. Also, Cathar's Crusade, for the same reason. Also, the Cathars were an actual Christian group in medieval Europe, although they were definitely not the ones doing the witch hunting, seeing as how they were also hunted, burned, and killed en masse by the Catholic Church, and they were mostly wiped out by the time of the Malleus. You know, this card might be a better pick than I initially thought. We got some Witch Cathar solidarity going here against the Inquisition. We love to see it. I threw in just one dual land. If you play this, you can put more. Godless Shrine. There's some allegory to be made here about how ungodly these Inquisitors were on their quest for cleansing perceived ungodliness. So, is this deck playable? I think so. Like I said at the beginning, it definitely falls into bracket 1, but if you're okay with that, it's got a decent mana curve, and there's several cards that allow you to sacrifice creatures or gain life, so there's a little synergy going on there. Overall, the deck is like $80-ish, and if you take out the Grave Pact and Season of the Witch, it'll take you down to like 40 to 50 bucks, and I think you can get it even lower than that if you want. But there is one card that I left out, which I think is the most important for remembering the witch trials, and that is Jaren, Corrupted Bishop. In medieval Europe, there was certainly a rise in Christians practicing magic, whether it was folk magic of the region or Solomonic magic, where people try to make contact with and control demons. In fact, it was such a problem that the University of Paris had to put out an official condemnation of magic to their students in 1277, telling them to stop summoning demons in their dorm rooms. Not literally, but you get the point. And wouldn't you know it, the University of Paris was a seminary. These were clerical students, and the people of medieval Europe who had the money, literacy, and access to books in order to practice magic were, you guessed it, priests. So the witch trials were ultimately a mass hysterical movement by Christians against Christians, and mostly entirely women, in an attempt to quell the very thing that the people in charge were doing. There were obviously no real witches, and the few women convicted of witchcraft who genuinely did do some of the things listed in the Malleus were doing so out of desperation, because they got the idea of witch pacts with the devil from witch hunting books, and hoped that there was some truth to them so that they could get a better life out of it. So if you decide to give this deck a try, as you're playing with both Inquisitors and Witches together, remember one thing: the real enemy isn't the Witches or the Inquisitors, it's women.
I hate women!
If you somehow made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. This is a bit of a one-off video with, you know, kind of minimal editing to what I would normally do. Like I said, it was supposed to be a one-off for Halloween, but that has well passed. But hey, it's always a good time for a spooky magic deck. So if you guys have any ideas for card choices I could have made, or you know, sort of these historical decks that you would like to see in future videos, or just any kind of feedback, please comment below. And I got a really incredible response from you guys from my first video, so thank you for that. And I'm gonna keep making them. So have a good day.